scariest Uber Eats delivery. I live in Portland, Oregon and was on an Uber Eats delivery just like any other. I've done thousands at this point. It was for Baskin-Robbins and the customer was only a couple miles away in a fancy apartment building. Everything seems normal. I pick up the order, I go to my car, and start heading to the apartment building. On the way there I get a text that said, "Hey, thanks for getting my order. Could just come inside and leave it on my table because I recently got home from the hospital and cannot bend down at the door to get it." It was a little odd. I've never been asked to come inside someone's place before, but without thinking about it too much, I texted back saying sure thing, I'll be there soon. I get another text saying my apartment is unlocked, I'll be 10 feet inside waiting. Right after reading that text, I got a chill because who the fuck says I'll be 10 feet inside the apartment to the delivery guy? I get to the building and it was one of those fancy ones with the keypad entry. I was told in the app to look for Zachary Winstrom but wasn't able to find it. I was only able to find Zachary Warner. That name was also the one for the right apartment number, 220. I called the unit on the keypad and someone picked up but didn't let me in. It was kind of weird. Most of the time people are eager to get their food so they let you in quickly. The fact that the name didn't match the order was kind of alarming too, because who misspells, or gives a wrong, last name, especially when you need to look them up on a keypad? The unit 220 that made the alleged Uber order isn't letting me in the building. Even after I called and texted them on the app, someone opened the door to the building and let me in. I was getting ready to just cancel the order and walk away. I was outside for a solid 5 minutes trying to call them or redial and be let in. I walk into the building and was greeted with the usual fancy apartment lobby crap, a nice calming floral scent that isn't too strong, the elegant lighting, marble and wood everywhere, and the complimentary tea-coffee station. I go inside the elevator and go up to the second floor. I immediately get a call from an unknown number when I step out of the elevator. I let it ring a little before answering. I pick up and it sounds like a distorted and angry male voice. I can't make out what the man was trying to say, but the man clicked on me after about 8-9 seconds. I get to the unit, which was cracked open just as the prophecy foretold. I knock first and get no answer. I crack the door a little more and yell, "I have your Uber order." I still hear nothing. It's absolutely silent in the apartment. My hair is standing on my back at this point. I look around the hallway outside the unit and see no one. I open the door entirely, no intention of actually going in at this point, and see an extremely dark apartment. I could just barely make out silhouettes of furniture and pictures on the wall. I shine my phone light in there and see a shadow of someone. They were behind the wall that borders the kitchen, which was to the immediate left of you as you enter the apartment. I yell "fuck this shit," and dropped the order at the door, which spilled all over, and ran the fuck out of the building. The shadow could have been a mannequin or a man. I didn't stick around long enough to find out. I'm 6 feet tall, and about 185. I also had a large knife and powerful taser on me, but wasn't going to risk it. Thinking back, the shadow was roughly 10 feet inside the apartment. I called Uber to report the crazy incident and they deactivated his account. I keep thinking about who was the person on the phone and what was their intention. Was this person inside a killer? Also, what's with the apartment not having the guy's name but a name similar to it? This was the scariest delivery I've ever been on. The hallucinations you see at night are real. Now, I can't say I know for a fact that everyone has seen these guys, but I know a lot of you have. Imagine this scenario: you're up late at night, isolated from anyone else in the house, almost asleep, when you see a flicker of light. Looking around, you see something shift, near the edge of a doorframe, behind a chair, next to the TV. You see them for a moment, then they're gone. You think nothing of it. They're not real, it's just a hallucination. I need to get to sleep. Well, I wish I could say you were right, but you aren't. And I'm sorry, but now that I've told you, you're in danger. So please, finish reading, and you'll understand and you can be safe. Essentially, as far as I can tell, these creatures are inside another reality, an echo of our own, with the same objects and buildings and stores and whatever else, but no us. There's nothing living there, except them. They're mostly dormant, explorers, not predators or prey. Sometimes they get hungry, though, and then people disappear. That's why it always happens to people who are conspiracy theorists and believe aliens are real and whatnot. They attack the people who know about them, to protect themselves. No, it's not UFOs or aliens or government cover-ups. The shadow people got hungry. And here's the most important part: they are always around you. You may only see them during the night, but that's because you're tired, and when you're tired, your eyes and brain work differently. You process things slower and you get into a distorted mindset where your memory seems to work differently, which is why they don't get erased from your memory. The only way to be safe is to stay around others, so go back to family or friends or something. Anywhere you aren't isolated is the best place to be. I'm sorry for putting you in danger, but I had to make sure someone else knew, because right now, I can see the shadows shifting in the edges of my view. The thing in the closet. Timmy used to be scared of the dark. Most kids were, after all. During the day, everything was beautiful, but things went bump in the night. Timmy still remembers the night it happened, when he met the thing for the first time. His mother just left the room after checking under the bed, reassuring him that he was perfectly safe, and with an exhausted sigh, shut the door behind her. As Timmy tried to fall asleep, the closet door creaked ajar. "Are you there?" Timmy's eyes flew open and looked straight at the closet. Petrified with fear, he lay in bed, still as a statue for a few seconds. Gathering his courage, he asked, "How did you get in my closet?" "I was always here, Timmy," the voice said softly. "How did you know my name?" "Because I know you. I've known you all your life. Better than you know yourself." "What do I call you then?" "You know my name, so I should know yours." How about the thing? Will that do?" Thing, Timmy said, trying it out. "I like it." The man pressed his foot against the brakes as the traffic light flashed red. The line of cars in front of him wasn't clearing anytime soon. He was never going to get anywhere at this rate. The next night, Timmy looked at his closet, wondering if the events of the previous night were just a dream. "Hello, thing," Timmy asked. "Hello, Timmy. Is there a reason you called?" "I wanted to check if yesterday was a dream." "I see." Then, for a few seconds, silence. "And also, I'm worried about my parents." "Why?" "They've been arguing so much lately, and now they're talking about getting a divorce. I don't want them to leave me." Timmy started to cry, tears streaming down his face like water from a leaky faucet. After he was done, the thing rasped, "Don't worry. Things may seem bleak now, but they will always stay together, no matter what. Because they love you, and nothing in this world will change that." Timmy dried his tears and smiled. "Thing, yes. Can you stay here with me? Until I fall asleep?" "Of course." The man drove forward as the traffic in front of him finally cleared. He pushed the accelerator and drove as fast as he could without breaking the law or risking getting someone severely injured. Just a little further. The thing in the closet was right. His parents had ended up making up and we're closer and happier than ever. Every night, he would talk to the thing about anything that worried him, and the thing never failed to make him feel better. But one day, his father fell sick. His mother told him he had something called cancer. Distraught with sorrow, he went to his bedroom as soon as the sun set and called for the thing in the closet. "Thing, are you there?" "I am. Dad is sick. Tell me he won't die. Tell me he'll get better," Timmy begged, eyes filled with tears. The thing sighed, and Timmy's heart sank. "He dies tomorrow. No matter what you do. I am so sorry." Timmy cried himself to sleep that night. The man drove up to the house and stepped out of the car. It was smaller than he remembered. Turning the key in the front door, he stepped inside, filled with nostalgia. He climbed up the winding stairs and went to his old bedroom. Opening the door, he stepped inside. It was devoid of all the games and toys he had as a kid, but one thing still remained. The old wooden closet was still there, covered in dust and waiting for him all this time. He opened it, just a crack, and spoke into it. "Are you there?" A few seconds of silence, and then came a familiar voice he had not heard in decades, one that brought tears to his eyes. "How did you get into my closet?" "My real experience with afterlife. Death is inevitable. We only hope it doesn't come too soon. When I was younger I lost my grandmother to a long battle with cancer. She was a loving mother, wife, sister, and friend to many. She attended church every Sunday since she was a child and volunteered to help the less fortunate wherever possible. In other words, a living saint. I didn't keep her same devotion to God after she passed. I struggled with my own demons to accept that I couldn't hold her hand or embrace her ever again. I prayed every day for an answer, a sign that she was someplace better. I prayed for weeks. I never got an answer. Instead of moving on with life, or turning a new direction, I looked to another power, one that was forbidden in my religion. God didn't answer me, but maybe the devil would. Through extensive research in libraries, cathedrals, revelations, and handwritten lore, I came to the conclusion I was confident enough to reach out. I removed the head of an innocent snake, bathed in its blood, and called out to a dark force who would prove to me that there was more after the curtain closes on life. I got an answer. It started off small. Footsteps in my basement, knocking on walls, and a feeling that I wasn't alone. My dogs began to growl at the basement door every night, and my siblings refused to go downstairs because it was too eerie. Things began to escalate one specific night when I had friends over. The rest of my family was out of town on vacation and we were playing games in the basement game room. We could hear someone running in circles above us, followed by the growling of my dog and his nails clacking on the hardwood floors, chasing whatever it was. After mustering the courage to file upstairs one by one, the basement door swung open without us touching it. A vase in front of the door, on the table, flew across the room. We were all speechless. I was mortified to feel a presence slip past me with the foul smell of rotting flesh. Events like this happened more frequently throughout the following months. My atheist stepmother bought a crucifix for her room out of fear. Nothing got better until a pastor came and cleansed the home. I later graduated high school and left. My family moved out shortly after. It's now years later and I still have nightmares about that home. There are many things I could go into detail about, but I don't have the time currently. My anxiety attacks have subsided and I took the opportunity to type this out. Maybe to share my story or maybe to warn others. There may not be a heaven, but there are dark energies in this world. Do not invite them in. The figure in my driveway. I started to notice it when I would come home late from my boyfriend's house or if I had a later work shift. As I would close the garage, I would look to make sure the garage is closed all the way, and that's when I would see it. I've heard stories online about shadow people and it's just as you would imagine one to look like. Tonight is the third night I'm seeing it. It's just a dark, black figure of a tall person. To me it looks more male than female. It's really hard to tell because of how dark and far away, but it doesn't give me a good feeling at all. It terrifies me. I haven't told anyone about it. I feel like they'll think I'm crazy. I just got back from a late work shift. I'm standing inside my garage door, not wanting to look if it's there, but I know it's there because I can feel it. I muster up some courage and count to 3 to open my eyes and look. I open my eyes and stare down my dark driveway, and sure enough it's there, but only now the figure is closer. It's in the middle of my driveway instead of at the end, just standing there not moving or doing anything. It's like it just appeared there. I slam my hand onto the garage door opener and get into my house as fast as I can. I call my boyfriend frantic. He calms me down a bit and says he'll stay with me, and if I keep seeing it then we'll stay at his house for the time being. I don't know what it wants. I don't know why I keep seeing it or why it's in my driveway, but it keeps getting closer and closer. I'm just scared what it'll do when it gets to me or even in my house. I decided to stay at my boyfriend's house because of how freaked out I am. We're packing up some bags of things I'll need. I feel relief that I'm not staying there anymore and that I'll feel more safe not alone. I meet my boyfriend in my driveway with my bag and get into the car while he loads it in. I look up at my house, and just as we inch out of my driveway, with the streetlight reflecting light on the window, I think I can see a tall dark figure peeking behind the front room curtain. I scream and my boyfriend slams on his brakes. I point, with a shaking finger, towards the window. His eyes follow my finger and his eyes grow wide with fear. The creep of Oak Lane. My story may be cringe. This is my first horror story. I am an 17-year-old female who goes to the Columbus High School in Maple. I live on Gold Avenue, and don't have a car, so I have to walk by Oak Lane to get to school. I carry pepper spray with me at all times, and keep it in my locker when I get to school. There was reports of a page 3D0PH1L3R at P First who attacked girls who were walking through Oak Lane alone. One hot morning in June, I was walking to school. I had left my pepper spray at home. I was walking like normal and then tripped. A nice man helped me up. I thanked him and he said no problem. Would you like a coffee from my shop? I was uncomfortable, but I said yes. I chugged the delicious frappuccino. He did a great job. I suddenly felt faint, so I said goodbye and was about to leave, but then I felt dizzy. I woke up in a strange dark room. I suddenly saw the door open and the lights flickered, then turned on. I noticed my normal clothes were gone, and I was now in just my bra, and covered in something white and strange. Then I realized, this man was the creep. So I found my normal clothes and cleaned off. I bolted. I made it home, but I didn't remember to lock the door, so I heard it opened and I screamed. I saw him again. He was walking up the stairs, and almost at my door, so I jumped out the window, and ran, even though I think I broke my arm in the fall. I ran to my sister's apartment. She had a husband who was 6'5" and very strong and intimidating. She wasn't home. I saw the creep. He had a knife. Next thing I know, I'm in a hospital with several stab wounds and very bloody. Also, the nurses and doctors saw my condition, and after seeing the cameras at my house and in the street and at my sister's house, they knew my story. They finally had found the creep. It took an almost dead teenager who was kidnapped and R4 page 3D for them to find him, but I guess it's okay. Sorry for the cringe. The smiling gentleman. I hate fevers. Because every time I have a fever, I know things would go dark if I'm asleep. I would have terrible nightmares that will never be forgotten. But there's this one particular fever dream that still haunts me every night. I call him the smiling gentleman. He's 8 feet, with a slender body and wears a gentleman's suit, and has a deformed smile, a smile that reaches out to his ears, but I assure you he is harmless. It only haunts me because of his appearance, but surprisingly he's gentle. One night I had a really bad fever. It was 6 p.m. and my body feels like they're giving up, so I had to take some rest, and I had this fever dream. It was on a park, an abandoned park. It was so dark that my vision becomes very blurry because it was very foggy. I sat on a bench and I didn't know what to do. It was just peaceful, but then I heard footsteps behind me and OFC. I looked back and I saw him. I was paralyzed because of my fears. He sat beside me. I couldn't look away, fearing that if I looked away it would be my end. But I heard him said, "Don't be afraid. I didn't mean to scare you." I couldn't reply. I was too afraid to speak. He then gave me a cigarette. I don't even smoke. He said, "I have never thought I would meet someone in here again. I don't even remember when was the last time I had a mate." My fear slowly began to ease up. I asked him, "Who are you?" He replied, "No name. I am simply a nobody. I am a virtue of life and extremity of death." We talked and talked. It feels like talking to a friend. "It is time for you to go," he said. "Since it's a dream, I don't know my reality." So I said, "Go where? You will find out," he said. He finger snapped and then I woke up. I woke up with a cold sweat, but I am completely healed. It was 1 a.m. when I woke up. Crazy part is I completely remembers my dream. That dream in particular, I remember his face, though I had to admit he looks very scary, but I hate to admit, but he has a gentle heart. IDK if I'm the only who dreamt about him, but I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one. Something is flowing me. I think fear something flowing me. This has been happening for about 3 months. I live in a wooded area, so there is a lot of animals. I sometimes see a bear here and there and other animals, but I don't think this is an animal. When I was outside chopping some wood, I heard something coming from the woods. I just thought it was a wolf or something running around, so I just continued chopping the wood. About 30 minutes go by and I heard it again, but this time it was closer, so I just went inside. I didn't want whatever was out there to get to me. When I went inside, I heard this scream. It didn't sound human, it didn't sound like an animal, so I look out of my window to the woods and I just seen something standing there. It didn't look like an animal. I didn't know what it was. So I went outside and grabbed my shotgun and waited for whatever was out there to move closer so I could shoot it. It didn't move, not one bit, and when I mean it didn't move, it didn't move. I ran back inside and locked all my doors and just went to sleep on my couch. This keeps happening and I don't know what to do. It followed me everywhere. I went to my mom's house to visit. 3 hours go by and I hear the scream again, and I think my mother heard it too, so I told her to just lock the doors and don't open it. I ended up staying at my mom's house for a week because she was scared. When it was time for me to go, I got in my car and started to drive home, but when I was driving I heard the scream, so I decided to speed up. When I got home I did the same thing I did last time, but I decided to call the cops. I told them about my problem. They told me they would keep a lookout. I don't know what to do anymore. Everywhere I go I hear that screaming and see that thing. Chaos follows. Chaos follows me into the night, when the sun is just a faded shadow barely in sight. I lie awake hoping that monster forgets me. Wrapped in my blanket I feel secure, making sure all my toes are accounted for. I hear the creak of the door and a shuffle inching across the floor. Monster muffles words under their breath, and from their mouth the stench of death. I pretend that I don't hear a thing, while silent thoughts are on my face, and not so quietly my heart begins to race. Monster wails a viscous call and I hurriedly run down the hall, followed by thuds and bangs in flight. I find myself in search of light. Monster grabs me by my ear and tells me things I do not wish to hear. How mom and I look so much alike, and that it's not fair that I'm alive. How the alcohol has given truth. I must be buried with no proof. Monster takes me by the hand and tells me tales of foreign land. I'm shoved outside into the cold. I do not understand what I'm being told. I scream and cry for day to come and to be saved by someone. Monster knows only dark is in sight. Chaos follows me into the night. Who wrote a short story about an art student finding hidden horror within an average painting? Can someone please help me identify the author and title of this short story? About 20 years ago, I had a book of short stories that included Clive Barker's Age of Desire. I am fairly sure I lent the book out and never got it back. It also included a story about an art student who became obsessed with a painter much like Thomas Kincaid. Typical landscapes that certainly had style, but little substance. Hopefully this doesn't set off a debate about Kincaid. My mom loved the guy, yet, as he was studying the paintings he supposedly found hidden figures and demons, for lack of a better description, among the mundane. He decided to make this painter a center of a thesis and would tell his colleagues and friends about the hidden abnormalities, and most were dismissive about finding anything but the typical in the paintings. His obsession led to his insanity, and I believe he was committed or perhaps died of fright. If memory serves, and it may not, the ending of the story was his best friend ended up looking at all of his notes and looking at one of the paintings of study, and then his friend noticed the same demons, leading the reader to think the same fate would befall him. Can anyone help me identify the story name and author? No heaven. Prologue. Welcome to Remedy, Texas. The old city limits sign was decrepit to the point of failing to even dent the dark blue Honda crashing through it, leaving behind little more than chunks of wood and rusted metal. The world didn't look any different from one side of the sign to the next. Any distant observer might think of that whole area as little more than an old and massive clearing in the otherwise heavily wooded county. From a distance, it seems peaceful. From a distance, you can't see the ruins. Sarah didn't have to see them to know about them though. She'd already heard plenty about the recent messes made within the town through the media and letters from her daughter's childhood friends. What drew her back to Remedy, however, was neither. She didn't care much about Remedy's condition at this point. She hadn't cared about that for years. The reason for her return was more personal than she would care to tell most people. In fact, the only other person who knew the reason was the man that contacted her, the head of the local police department, Clay Burke. Sarah and Clay had their own history involving the town, and it was one most of the residents would rather forget. But there was no forgetting, least of all for her. The first few weeks following her toddler son's abduction still played out in her dreams sometimes. It was August 18th of 1982 when he was taken. The last time she'd seen him was when her husband decided to bring their children to the diner he was so proud of creating. The first in what he hoped would be many similar establishments. Henry Emily was one of the more unique men Sarah had been with, which was mainly the reason why she stayed with him. Well, maybe that's not the most accurate way to put it. His uniqueness is what brought them together, but his specific vision for the business was why she stayed. That vision was based on something neither of them had much in the way of during their youth. That something was family. Neither of them came from the most stable family units, and that didn't go unknown by many people in their neighborhood. The desire to not only have a stable family, but also a way to help others maintain one by way of making some special memories, was the inspiration for Henry's first prized creation. Fredbear's Family Diner was the name of the place. It wasn't in the city limits, but it was close enough to Remedy to draw the people's attention. When it did, there were certain surprises inside that ensured its growing popularity. That honor goes to the mascots. Two human-sized robots modeled after a bear and a rabbit stood atop the center stage of the diner just opposite the entrance. They could sing, they could dance, they could even tell jokes, within what their programs would allow, at least. They weren't quite what Henry and Sarah hoped they'd be, but they were good enough for the children and their families. Their own kids, Charlie and Sammy, had no complaints about them. The twins weren't at the diner often, but when they were, it was like their own little world in many ways. There were so few dull moments for them, whether they be playing or listening to their father point out various facts about the inner workings of the playful animatronics. Sarah supposed he was hoping one of them would continue the business when he wasn't around, to pass the legacy he was trying to build down to his loved ones. Not the worst idea, she thought. Everything was fine for a while, the diner remained beloved by the community, and the twins were learning at a level beyond their years when it came to Henry's robots. They were only 4 at the time. Whether their rapid learning pace was due to how they were being raised, or if they were just naturally gifted, who really knew? Sarah always liked to think it was both. Then, months after the grand opening, Sammy was snatched away without any trace. Charlie was found by her father in the storage closet backstage, curled into the fetal position and crying her eyes out. They never could get her to tell them what happened. No evidence was ever found as to where the boy went or who had taken him. 2.5 years later, a string of similar tragedies would take place. 5 other children were taken from the second place Henry opened, and once again, no bodies or evidence was left behind. Nothing but dark crimson stains streaked across the floor of the storage room. Clay Burke was one of several detectives trying to end the nightmare, and he was there when Sarah found her husband's dead body sprawled across their living room. The rest of that week was still blurry in her mind. She remembered sending her daughter to live with Henry's sister until her affairs were in order. She remembered learning that Henry had left the business rights to her. She remembered wondering how she could possibly manage raising Charlie by herself and properly maintaining the business at the same time. And she remembered deciding that Charlie would probably be better off with her aunt anyway, with someone who was more stable. Now, 12 years after leaving Remedy, she was back. For whatever reason, she found herself taking note of every difference that caught her eye on the way to the police station. Certain buildings had been recently burned, trees had been roughly torn down, and it was clear that the people were still trying to salvage what they could from the recent storms that had torn their way through the place. The station itself wasn't in great shape either, although it was noticeably less wrung out than most other buildings on that street had been. Pulling to a stop in the parking lot, Sarah removed her keys and looked through the front window of the precinct, running a hand through her light brown hair as if that would magically make it less messy. She couldn't see much from where she sat, but noticed the form of an officer near the front desk. She leaned back and listened to the sounds of the light rain pelting her car, hoping they would calm her growing anxiety as they often did. She didn't know what was coming, but she knew it wasn't good. Good things didn't exactly seem to thrive around that unnatural town. Missing Part 2. The last few days without Damien have been absolutely horrible. I never thought I'd be missing my dead brother standing at the foot of my bed every night. I had terrible nightmares every time I tried to sleep after he first disappeared, but it stopped once he started his visits. I'd never felt more calm or safe. Now the nightmares are back, and worse than ever. More horrifying and real than anything I've ever dreamt in my life. The second night after he'd stopped visiting, I tried so hard to stay up and hopefully catch him. I didn't realize I'd fallen asleep until I rubbed my eyes and looked to my floor. Some type of black liquid had flooded my room, and I had the worst sense of dread. I didn't know what to do, but before I could even think of anything, my body was moving off my bed, into the thick black ooze. I tried to stop myself, but it felt like I was walking through molasses, and as I tried my hardest to grab onto something, anything, I realized I was walking to my window. Against my will, I opened it, letting the ooze spill out over the side of my house. The next thing I knew I was spilling out with it. I expected to hit the ground, hard. Instead, I was already standing again, this time, knee-deep in hundreds of corpses. My brother's corpses, each one depicting a different, but horrifying, cause of death. Burned to a crisp, decapitated, limbs torn from his body, every single bone broken multiple different ways, deep cuts all over him. I couldn't look away, no matter how badly I wanted to. Then I started to sink. The dead bodies of my brother pulling me down, into, well, I don't know what, and I did not want to find out. I tried climbing out, but all I could grab onto were his decaying bodies. It was hopeless. But I saw him, Damien. He was at the edge of the woods calling my name, crying, but no sound was coming out, and he was just standing there, waving his arms like a crazy person. I tried to yell for his help, but that thick black liquid started to fill my mouth and lungs. I was choking, suffocating. I was going to die in this nightmare. Was I going to die for real? I had never felt so much panic and fear in my life. But then I heard Damien's voice for the first time in 5 years. Riley, wake up. I was in my bed again, awake, and soaked head to toe. My sheets, my mattress, my pillows, all drenched in sweat. I frantically looked around for any sign of Damien or the black ooze. I saw nothing but the time on my bedside table clock, 6 a.m. I started crying uncontrollably. I just couldn't help it. Damien was gone again, and I still can't help him. I don't know why I had that dream. I don't know why he disappeared again. I don't know where he went. I just wish he would come back. He was my best friend since our parents brought me home. I was 3, and my biological parents had been forced to give up their rights, after all of the horrifying things they let their friends do to me, leading to all 5 of their arrests. I ended up in the foster care system. The Flax were the 3rd family to take me in, but the first to never lay a hand on me. The first to show me love. The first family that wanted me to be their daughter. Damien was so happy since the moment they brought me home. It was like him and I knew each other already, because we instantly were inseparable. He treated me like a princess from day one, as did our mom and dad. I don't even remember how time had passed so fast, but the next thing I knew, I was 15 and he was 20. The rattling of bunks in the dormitory. True story. It didn't happen to me, but it happened to my male classmate on the 5th floor. It was any typical night. All were sound asleep, resting for tomorrow. The hallway was filled with the sound of the wind and the distant busy streets of the city. Faint lights from the hallway inside the barracks gave light to the dim atmosphere that hugs us all to sleep on each barracks. All were, except for my classmate. He remembered waking up with a heavy feeling in his chest. His eyes were wide awake, scanned the dimly room. He tried to move but couldn't even lift a finger. For what felt like minutes of thinking what to do, his bed suddenly shook vigorously, his body along with it. He had a sinking feeling as his eyes wandered around, looking for something or someone on this quiet night. But then appeared before his eyes were a figure of a human climbing the bed in a grotesque manner. It had black feathers that surrounded its body, claws enough to kill. He felt his heart hysterically boom throughout his ribcage and tried to scream as it made its way silently by his foot. The figure sat like it was staring at him, emitting a dark aura. After that, he woke up with it as the only memory he can remember from last night. It had lingered with him before sleep for days. In one of the mornings within that week he experienced it. He told everyone what had happened to him. Turns out, he wasn't the only one who witnessed it. The bunk opposite to his on the lower bed, his roommate, still one of my classmates, was awake at the same time. But instead of a figure as he described, he saw a child climbing towards his bed through the ladder, clearly pale and somehow dead. What only coincided their story was it happened around 3 in the morning, Tuesday. This has been a common occurrence in our dorm, and we're glad our first year days as dorm occupants are over. The next victims would be the newcomers next year. We has also asked senior occupants, and they too had already experienced it even during the day back then, sometimes now. I hope they don't wander on parts where there would be no people to hear them.